Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show, and my co-host is Brian Chirichiello. Today with us we have Representative Laurie Sanborn from Bedford.
Hi there.
And
thanks for having me.
And we also have Representative Pam Tucker from Greenland.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hey, welcome, representatives. We appreciate you coming on to our show.
Sure.
Let's start by getting a little bit of a background on both of you so the viewers know a little bit about you.
Sure.
And we'll start with Pam.
Sure. I've been a legislator. I was elected in 2008, so I served 2.5 terms for the town of Greenland. I've lived there for 13 years, so I know all of the people in the town, and that's how I got elected in an off year, because I'm a Republican, and that was an off year for Republicans. That's when Obama came into power. Since then, I've just been involved in trying to do what's best for the state of New Hampshire, and certainly my town, because that's ultimately who I report to.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'm Laurie Sanborn. I'm in my second term. I live in Bedford, and I represent a flotarial district, which is a little bit larger, which is Bedford and Amherst. It's 31,000 people. And I'm a 4th-generation New Hampshire native, so I really cared very deeply about the state, and I started to notice it was changing rapidly right before my eyes. I never had been politically active until about 4 or 5 years ago, and then I started to pay attention and got alarmed, so decided to run. So I'm enjoying it immensely.
Excellent, excellent. And today's topic is, obviously, we're here to discuss business and how we can improve business in New Hampshire. So,
yeah, both of you ladies are members of the Business Coalition, I believe. Correct?
Absolutely, and I hope this is not going to be a debate in any way, because Pam and I think, are completely aligned in terms of being pro-business. We both agree that in order to create jobs, to expand the economy, to do all the wonderful things we need to do, you need to have good businesses, and you need to be friendly to those businesses in our state. You know, New Hampshire does not operate in a vacuum. We need to be the most competitive, the most attractive state to do business in, and that's what we've been trying to do for the last few years.
Yes, well, ever since I've been in the legislature, and it's something every year we have the House Republican Alliance Summit where we talk about what can we do? What can we do to make our state better, be it along the lines of businesses, which is we're talking here, or liberty, or education, all of those things. And every year, how can we make our state more business friendly? It's very important. And it isn't just a bubble when you talk about business, it's everything that leads up to it. Education is a key component of that. We have to have the trained workforce there, the business environment, the regulation environment. Those are all components of it. So those are all things we think about when we start talking about how can we make this a better state.
Well, it's also a non-partisan issue. This is, and the Business Coalition is a non-partisan organization.
That's right. That's how we started the organization, because we really, many of the issues that we work on really aren't Republican versus Democrat. They're things that we've been able to come together. And this year is a perfect example, because, you know, Republicans are in the minority in the House. They're in the majority in the Senate. So we could only get things through that were somewhat nonpartisan to get it all the way through, and then have the governor actually sign off on it. Right. And we were able to get some pretty major reforms through this year.
So all in all, how do you think we did this year versus maybe 2 years ago? Was this a different year?
Very different year, right? Okay. I'm sure you would agree.
Well, you know, you got to compare what 2 years ago compared to the previous 4 years was phenomenal, because one of the key components of helping businesses and helping the people of our state, which is part of all of that, is keeping our taxes low, and that means keeping spending down. And you know, prior to that, 2006 and 2008, those 2 cycles, they raised taxes and they raised the budget. I mean, the budget kept going up and up. The first time, since 1940 or something, that the budget actually went down was after 2010 elections. Right. And that said something to our business community that, yeah, we're not going to keep going to the people and asking for more money. We're going to start living within our means. And I think moving forward, that's probably one of the best things we can do to help businesses, is let's maintain the budget. We're at $10.7 billion now. Right. Why do we need to raise taxes? Do you know what? The revenues are going to grow, because they just will. They always do. Revenues grow every year. If we can keep the budget flat in the next cycle, we're going to be in good shape. We'll have more revenue. We'll have the same amount of spending. And you know what? No children are going to be out there sleeping on the street, and granny's not getting thrown from a bridge like they said we would. That never happened.
Right. Right.
So we got to just maintain where we are in terms of spending.
Right, and don't you agree that the healthier the economy is, the more businesses that start up, and then the more revenues will follow that?
Absolutely. That's why we care. You know, sometimes people ask me, why are you so pro-business, Laurie? Why did you create this business coalition? And I explain, you know, it's not just being pro-business. It's being pro-New Hampshire. It's being pro-jobs. You know, we want to keep youth in our state, and the best way to do that is to have jobs here, to have opportunity here. And, you know, when businesses do well, they pay more in taxes without having to raise rates. And, you know, when they do well, they also can contribute more to their employees' benefits. They can hire, they can contribute to training, they will do community events. You know, it all comes back around. So all boats rise, I guess, in the end when our economy is doing well in New Hampshire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the big things, well, why don't we talk about a few of the things that we did get accomplished this year for businesses?
Sure. I'll throw in a couple. You can throw in a few, too. One, and I think it went to your committee, was the New Hampshire Corporations Act.
The New Hampshire Corporations Act was we needed to redo it. The bottom line is we definitely need to redo how our corporation acts. It was antiquated. Now, was it the best thing that we could have done out there? I don't know about that, but I tell you what, it was a heck of a lot better than what we had. It's still, in my opinion, it's a little bit of an insider's ball game in terms of only lawyers can use it and this and that, but that's going to be the case no matter what. But it puts us at least on par with other states. Compared to the top states, you know, like your Delawares and Wyomings, we're still behind, but that's okay. We're at least not last anymore. So that's one thing. Another thing we did to help businesses was when we talked about the Dealers' Bill of Rights. That was another big proponent. That's going to help our dealers who employ thousands and thousands of people across our state. And that it's interesting because that was a fun battle. As some people put it, that it was the millionaires versus the billionaires.
Right.
And so which side are you going to take? And we chose the side of what's going to be best for the business and what's going to be best for our states. And it wasn't really choosing sides, it's really what is best. And so that kind of mutes that argument about taking sides on that one.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to fairness, really,
Oh, without a
because
doubt.
you know, there really wasn't the sense of fairness between these big manufacturers, which are not New Hampshire-based companies, and New Hampshire family companies that have been around for a long time, hiring New Hampshire people, wanting to use New Hampshire suppliers to do their maintenance and work in their facilities, and they were being barred from doing that. So we're just creating that position of fairness in our state is really important.
What was some of the issues that these corporate companies were making these dealerships
Oh, it was crazy.
change out their
Change out a door. Well, it's so funny because we got to hear it in our committee, and they came forward, and rightly so. And first off, let me back up, because there's always the constitutional argument that we shouldn't be involved in contracts between private individuals, was basically what it was. Well, the precedent has been set that if it is an unfair contract, and to the extent, is it under duress? No, but it is, because if you don't sign, you're not going to get the dealership. And it's not like you have, you know, it's not $1,000 here. We're talking millions of dollars worth of inventory and time that these people have invested. And so it has been proven in federal court that we could get involved. So I'll get rid of the constitutional argument first and foremost. The second piece was, it was unfair. They're coming in and they're docking these dealerships for having the wrong doorknob on the back side of the door. Or coming in and saying, oh, you know, we have to redo the whole front of the store. Now that's not going to sell one more car.
Right.
Cars are almost a commodity. You go online, you look, you see how much you want to pay for a car, then you go down to the shop and buy one. You don't drive by the Cadillac dealership or the Honda dealership and say, ooh, that's a pretty dealership, I'm going to go buy a car. That's not the case. Right. I understand their need for conformity, that you want all the dealerships to pretty much look the same. But to change out every 3-5 years and have these dealerships put out this money that's not making one more dollar a profit or hiring one more person, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
You know, another thing that the Business Caucus has been really working on is trying to roll back some of the excessive regulations and red tape, because that's what kills so many businesses. And it just is so time consuming. And one of the biggest complaints has to do with our Department of Environmental Services, just because you can get bogged down there. And those people do a great job, but it really sometimes sets up some barriers. We've been working for a number of years on the permitting process, and we had 4 different land use permits. And sometimes when you stack that all up, it turns into quite a bit of long time. And money, because now you're hiring attorneys and consultants and so forth. And so just this year, we finally passed an integrated permit option. So put the 4 down to 1, keeps the permit fee itself the same, but it speeds up the time dramatically.
Yeah, I think we're familiar with that with the 93 issue.
I
with
bet you are.
Ford.
Right.
There's been many years trying to get another exit.
Right.
Yes.
And it's just got bogged down
Right.
with its
And the red
studies
tape.
and a lot of money. A lot of money.
Well, speaking of the permit process and all that, we did bring this up on our last show. We had Representative Separato on our show, and we were talking a little bit, and how New Hampshire has so many different regulations and permits for just about everything. And I know you're a small business owner yourself, so your experience, this firsthand.
It's mind-numbing sometimes as a small business owner, but all business owners deal with this. The regulation, that business-to-government relationship has gotten a little out of control. There's just too many steps. There's too many different agencies have to interact with. So we've been working on a couple of things. One is the Business One Stop, and that's actually a bipartisan initiative because we're trying to modernize our government so that when you have to interact with them, you're not going to 8 different agencies to try to just get your permits done.
Right.
And you know, every business owner that I've ever met wants to do it properly. They're there to do the right thing, but just trying to figure out what the right thing is brutally hard.
Right.
So that's one of the things the Business One Stop is working on now, is that you'll be able to log in and say, okay, I want to open my restaurant. Where do I go from here? And it will kind of walk you through. Well, you need to connect with the Department of Revenue Administration. You need to talk to the Health Department. You need to talk to the Liquor Department.
Right.
And it will walk you through some of those steps. Right now, when you interact with government, you need to print off a form, fill it out by hand, mail it into the office. Then, of course, if you're spending all that time as a business owner, they're spending the same amount of time in government. Pretty inefficient waste of time.
Right.
A lot of room for error and duplication of errors. So this way, if we can modernize it, we can digitize it, you'll be able to enter your forms right online, populate everything, and they get it that day.
Wow.
In the long run, it'll be less expensive too
It will.
for everyone,
For
both
businesses
government
and for us, right.
Yes, for the business owner, if you have one place to go to do it. And you really do need someone, it is a great start of someone to say, okay, these are all of it, but the one stop, and they should be able to interact so you don't have to refill out, okay, my business name is this. It should just auto-populate.
Right, and make it easy for the business owner. because
The
that's
easier the
key.
better.
Right.
That's the most important thing, because that's a huge barrier, and the cost, just the cost alone.
Yeah. Let's talk about electric rates, and I know we didn't get into it this year heavy, Northern Pass, but I think we're going to probably talk about it next
We
time.
recently did get a packet in the mail with alternative routes, and they're really trying to sell it down here. I don't know why they're trying to sell it in Derry, but they
It's
are
not
trying
us,
to sell this
yeah.
package.
Right.
Well, even over on the seacoast, which
Oh,
it's not
okay.
coming over there.
Electric rates as far as being competitive in business with other parts of the country. I mean,
It's a huge
Northeast is
factor.
usually high.
Yeah, it's a huge factor. Obviously, we care a lot about manufacturing in our state. It is a core function that we do here, but we could be doing a lot more if our electricity rates were lower.
Right.
The question is Northern Pass going to truly lower the rates for New Hampshire ratepayers? And I'm not sure about that. I hope so. That is the goal. But you know, I've also met with people in the North Country, and it's a concern because their competitive advantage up there is the beauty, is the natural beauty, and to see the towers would be a real problem. So I'm thrilled to see that PSNH and others are working toward maybe burying some of the lines, maybe rerouting them so that they're not visible, because that's important. But when you read the literature, I don't see a strong commitment to lowering our rates, and I'd like to see more of that.
I agree with Laurie on that, because when you look at it, the power's coming down, and whether it's green or not, we can debate that, because these are huge, massive dams, and we went up there and saw, and what happens sometimes is when they put these dams in, this is the green me coming out a little bit, is that the salmon who swim upstream have to be rerouted, and sometimes maybe those salmon don't necessarily take that new route. So I guess the first question is the energy really green, because it is hydroelectric? The second thing coming down is, this is just, when the lines come down, it's going to be hooked into the whole grid. This isn't just for New Hampshire. This is hooked into the whole New England grid. And to Laurie's point, is that really helping us? It is giving us another energy supply, which we want. It is creating some jobs. I mean, we're initially going to have the construction jobs, which we all want. Long-term jobs, not a whole lot, because it's just a couple stations and that's it. So on my opinion, it's still out there. The jury's still out on whether or not we do this. The burying, I think, truly is the best idea if, in fact, they can do that.
Yeah.
I think burying most lines anywhere in the state is the best line, especially down
wind
here
conditions
with the
and the weather.
weather that we've
If you
had.
could do it, excuse me, on state-owned right-of-ways, you could also collect some property tax money if you wanted
That's a
to.
good point.
So, I mean, it would be a win-win-win for everyone. I think everyone's open-minded to diversifying our energy sources and being more reliant on things that are from this area. But how we do it matters.
I don't know if anybody even done a study on how much repair work has been done on our lines over the last, say, 8 years or so. I know we've lost our power at my house at least the last 4 years, 5 years, for 3 to 5 days each time.
And that's because of weather issues? Yeah.
Always
Are you
weather.
out in the country? Or
No, I live right here in Derry. I live on the edge of Derry. I live on the Wyndham line.
Countryside of
The
Derry.
countryside. See, I live in a burb too, but our lines, because it's a newer subdivision, they're all buried.
All
so
underground.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
and
you don't have a problem.
see them. You got the aesthetic piece of it, and you don't have to worry about anything in terms of losing power.
That makes sense. I mean, the last few years we've seen the ice storms
Ice,
and
yeah.
some of the other
The
stuff.
Mother's Day floods and
It almost seems like every year they're
there's something.
Yeah, I got to
outage.
tell you a funny story about the when we lost the ice storm.
Yes.
All of Greenland basically lost their power. There's only 2 subdivisions that didn't, and they were the 2 newer ones. And so you're driving through the dark, because you remember it was right before Christmas. It is dark at 4 o'clock. Everyone's driving through, then all of a sudden they come into our neighborhood, and everyone's got their Christmas lights up. But they became refugees for everybody too. Every house had everyone else in the town at their house taking showers.
My neighbor was in Florida at the time, and the power goes out for, I don't know, 9 days. We lost it, but his generator kicked on. His Christmas lights came on. He got home, of course, he had no propane left.
But his house looked good. The rest of you are going, "Err."
Now everybody has a generator. Over the years, you used to have to look out to see whose lights were back on, so you can know that it's time to go turn the generator off.
Let's talk about what New Hampshire has advantage-wise that maybe surrounding states do not have that would attract business and bring business in.
Well, I think one of the first things is there is something to be said for the New Hampshire advantage of the no income tax, no sales tax. That really is, it attracts people, it attracts good people to live here. The other thing is, and some people look at this as a negative, is that we do have an older workforce. And we know we're getting older here. That's not a bad thing, because what you have in terms of a workforce is you have a more mature, more experienced workforce. So I look at that as a positive. We also have quite a few good universities here, and we're talking top shelf. We're not talking the lowest level. Plus, we do have the Great Bay Community College. We have the community college system, which is linked into that. It's a feeder system for those kids who the university isn't just what they need just now. And they have a great program for skilled trades, which when we start talking manufacturing jobs, that's something we need as well.
Right.
So we do have a lot to offer businesses if they want to come here.
Right.
And I would add that access to the legislature is a big deal. When I talk to business owners,
It's huge.
they want to be able to pick up the phone and call their representative and know that there's someone out there fighting for them, that's listening to them, that they can also call the governor, they can call our new economic development commissioner and get a return call and connect the dots very quickly. And I think that really makes a difference. You don't get that in other states nearly the same as what you get in New Hampshire.
Absolutely not. It's funny because you read a lot of things about other states and you meet a lot of other state representatives and senators. And what's funny is we will pick up the phone for any business, whether it's in our town or not. I mean, I take anyone's emails, and they know they can call us, any one of us, and they don't have to write a check for us to call them back, which in other states, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, in other states too, not every bill sees the light of day. Maybe it's the speaker or someone who collects the bill, and maybe they get put into a file and they never come out. And that is not the case in New Hampshire, as you guys know. Every bill gets a public hearing, and sometimes we've had some bills that on the face might seem not relevant, but they always bring up a good debate and a good eye-opening, shine the light on something that we need to know about, and that's what we're there for.
Yeah, I think more states and even our federal government should be more structured like New Hampshire. Great representation, very, very spread out.
Right.
We don't get paid a whole lot.
$100. We get the
Not much.
$100.
Oh, no, after taxes?
That's a good thing. That's a good thing, because if you look at other states, they do it because, I mean, look at California. What, they're paid $170 or something like that? It's obscene. So you know they're running for the money, and of course, and they have to raise a lot of money to get these seats. Sometimes we don't even have to raise $1 for our seats. If other states were structured as that, they would really have the responsive government that we have here in New Hampshire. And I tell you what, that really is an advantage that other states don't have and aren't ever going to have.
Right.
That is great. And the average, I think I read somewhere that the average representative in New Hampshire, when they run it, they spend about $460 to get elected.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But they're, we are more in touch with our constituents because there are so many reps that they can call and talk, and it isn't necessarily a town thing. It's any rep, and
Absolutely.
every single bill brought up before us gets heard.
You know, the other thing, I've been asked this question, after what happens after you get elected? And I tell people all the time, after the campaign's over, once a constituent calls you, you never ask, well, what party are you from? And, immediately the partisan, you forget about that, and you immediately go to your service job, which is what the job really is you're there to serve, you're there to listen, you're there to solve problems. So I think that's what we're all there for.
I think a lot of people, I mentioned this to some people, and I've talked to people, and they've lost faith in government. Not necessarily New Hampshire government, not us.
Not us, because
But
you know what, you guys have been in your communities forever. They know you. They know you're not some shyster who's just trying to stay in office or some slick politician. We're real people. We're not some guy on TV or woman on TV. And so I don't think they've lost it in the New Hampshire case. On the federal level, I mean, when's the last time the House of Representatives had above 20% positive rating? I mean, I don't ever remember them having anything more than that, because it's hard. It's something. It's interesting when you talk to people. They ask you about federal programs all the time. Little do they don't really know a whole lot about what's going on here on the local level. It's our job to let them know, and you let them know, and then they realize, wow, I can really have an effect. And that's when they start getting a little more involved and paying attention to the local politics, knowing darn well that their taxes are going to go up or down, or this is going to happen or that's going to happen, and they can have a direct influence on it by talking to you and bringing forth the issues, or coming to committee and letting them know they can come to committee and bringing them there to committee, whether you agree with them or not. Having your constituents come to committees and testify. I think that's one thing I don't know that other states have that we have to the extent that we have.
Right. What's, in your opinion, what do we need to do going forward to bring additional business into the state that we're not doing right now?
There's so many things.
Well, you want to start at right to work? Or?
Well, no, I'll let you take the right to work issue, because that is a good point to talk about, and it will affect some businesses. But I think our tax environment is important, and I know it's not the only thing. Quality of life here, quality of education, quality of our natural resources all matter. But every business owner cares about taxes. It's the bottom line question.
Right.
And New Hampshire's tax rates are very, very high. And we're also nickel and dime to death. Right. So in addition to having one of the highest business profits tax rates, every time you turn around there's another fee, and a fee is a tax. Right. That is a concern. Also the number of regulations, and sometimes they're much more excessive than even federal government. And that's surprising, and we can't be like that. And I think if we can work on those two things, which I know that we can make New Hampshire even more attractive, because, like I said before, we're competing against other states. Right. A Massachusetts company could very easily cross the border, and when the governor there signs the bill to raise some taxes, those businesses then look at New Hampshire as being more competitive.
Right, but on the flip side of that now, some of these states can also give tax breaks that we really can't do.
This is true.
We can't do.
And I'm not a big fan of tax breaks, because I do like a level playing field, and for a number of reasons. One, because I sit on Ways and Means and I care about state revenues, and I want to make sure that they're coming from many, many different sources so we don't get ourselves into trouble. So that way, by not creating separate classes of taxpayers, you end up with a nice, even, uniform level of revenue coming in. Because if one industry is having a hard time, there's another one that's doing okay. So, and constitutionally, we cannot be giving all these special incentives.
Right.
And we've done some things, though. We have the Research and Development Tax Credit, which is small, but it does encourage companies to come to New Hampshire or start some emerging technology technologies here. And so those are the things we like to do.
Right.
Increasing thresholds for filing, which we've done some work on, so that the tiniest companies, the ones that are just starting out, get a little bit of a break. We can do those kinds of things, and we can do a better job at those things.
And the things that we did in the past in terms of the carry forwards that we've done, things like that are going to help. I agree with Laurie that the government can't pick winners and losers by virtue of giving tax breaks. That's just unconstitutional and wrong. And we see that happening on the federal level, and we see what's happening. Do I need to say Solyndra?
Right.
So we're better off staying on the straight and narrow. What can we do to make the state better in terms of bringing businesses here? Well, I do truly believe, and you all know this, I'm a big proponent of right to work. Yep. And we see Michigan, which is where I grew up originally, passing right to work. And you know what? All those union people, they all screamed and yelled and said, oh, you can't do this. In fact, one of my friends in Michigan unfriended me because she didn't and blocked me because I was for right to work. I can't believe that. I was actually saddened that someone felt that way. We're taking that personally because this is politics after all, and you know that.
There's many opinions, and you know it's all about respecting opinions.
It is about that. I mean, there was no personal attacks on it, but and my brother's in the union and my sister's in the union, and you see that, and I explained to them why, and they say, you know, it's not a bad thing. It's a choice. It just gives the employee choice, and there's no force this and that, and you don't see all of these wages going down. In fact, my brother says, oh no, they're going to replace me with 2 lower skilled workers. Well, what business in the right mind is going to do that? I mean, that doesn't make sense for productivity to take on 2 to pay at lower wages. It doesn't make sense. And so right to work is if it's going to help attract businesses here, it's something we should seriously consider.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've seen lots of studies on the right to work before we've seen the legislation, and a lot of them were both ways. And I personally believe that right to work would lower wages. It would bring in a quality. The companies that would come in here wouldn't bring in quality companies, quality paying jobs. And we need those jobs because New Hampshire is a revenue-based state where we collect our revenues is user fees, and for the most part people come skiing, go skiing or whatever, spend it, go shopping, go out to eat, you get the rooms and meals tax. It's all associated. If you have more expendable income, then you're going to spend more. Means we're going to get more tax money. But right to work, I honestly believe, would actually lower the wages. You'd get companies coming in, like for instance, why wouldn't those companies come into New Hampshire right now? Why do they need right to work?
That's one of the things that Lynch ran on. He says, no, there's no reason that we need right to work. Nobody wants it. But I think that the Ruger case is a great example that was one of the issues that they didn't open here, is because it wasn't a right to work. And in terms of lower wages, if you have good quality manufacturing, good quality people for those jobs, they're going to have to pay them what they're worth. And right to work it's not going to affect whether they pay more or less. It's just going to give the employee the opportunity to be in that union and pay wages to that union or not.
Right.
Well, and just to comment on that, you know, right to work and having that in the state obviously tends to attract big manufacturers and companies. And truly the backbone of New Hampshire is smaller companies. Mm-hmm. You know, we have 50,000 or small businesses, many with 2 to 5, 10 people in them. And really, that's who we are. And we want to intermingle some bigger companies in there, but we have to make sure that we're taking care of those small businesses that are here and making it easier for them to operate.
Well, we have a prime example here in Derry. You drive down, as you came in here, you probably went right down our downtown and you see all the stores are closed. Yeah. Why? Because we have the big box store up the street that put a lot of these little places out of business and that sort of thing that goes on in many communities. And those are all small businesses that are no longer in business or can't afford to be in business in New Hampshire. So like you're saying, we need to take care of the little guy too. And you know, right to work is going to bring in more Walmarts. We really don't need more Walmarts. you know.
Well, and sometimes what I find, and I don't know anything about dairy, so this is not specifically about dairy, but sometimes the challenge is at the local level. So I always encourage people to get involved in the local decision making because, you know, sometimes the big boxes, if you want to call them that, get an easier time almost, it seems like, getting through some hurdles because they're known quantity maybe. And I think we just need to be aware of the regulations and the hurdles we're putting for these small businesses to try to expand on Main Street.
Right. And that's also a competition. I mean, if you have one store that's selling A and you have another store that can come in and sell A at a lower price, it's up to the consumer, and the consumer should have a choice to shop where they want. I'm never going to say that. I believe in choice, in education, and in business. It's important because I think we get the best when we have choices.
I'd like to touch a little on the education part because you had just mentioned it and it made me remember. One of the biggest problems we have in New Hampshire is our young people are leaving the state. So we educate these people, and they're wanted. From other states want them because they're so well educated. But no, I think one of the big issues we need to do is keep those young people here in New Hampshire.
Absolutely, and there's a couple of things we can do, and there's a number of things that the Business Coalition is working on right now. We are meeting with some like startup companies, some emerging technology companies right now in the Durham area, and they are setting up shop there because they want to work with the university. They want to use the university students to as interns so that they get some on-the-job kind of training, and so they can learn about the technology that's coming out, and then these businesses tend to spin off and create other businesses.
Right.
And so we'd like to see more of that. Now obviously UNH is the easy one to start with, but there's a lot happening at UNH in Manchester as well. There's a lot of high tech, a lot of STEM stuff going on there because of Dean Kamen and others.
Right.
And so I think we can capitalize on that, and I think once you have a center, people want to kind of go to that center and add to it because there's a lot of energy there. And we have, you know, Cambridge has that in Massachusetts and some of the other areas in Massachusetts. We can do that in New Hampshire, and it's starting to create a little bit of a buzz.
Right.
But we can do more. So I think those are the types of things that we'd like to keep working on.
Right, and we are doing things like that. Like I mentioned Great Bay Community College because it's basically in my backyard. They're doing the same thing, that they're partnering with businesses, and they're going out to these businesses. They're asking, okay, what do you need? What kind of skilled trades do you need? And they're working with them to develop that and the trades. And then these kids, if you will, are getting into that. And here you have someone who already knows the business as well as the trade, working together with the businesses. So it is a great coalition that they're doing together. And I think programs like that, what Laurie's talking about, what's happening over on the Seacoast, and I'm certain around other places in the state, are going to keep those younger people here as we continue to develop them.
Right. Yeah, that's important. We need to
it's interesting. I just got a chance to take a tour at the new facility in Rochester called Albany, and they're making parts for engines in planes. Excuse me, for Boeing and Boeing planes, I believe. And they're doing carbon fiber. It's high tech. It's very cool. But it's eventually going to have 400 to 500 people there, and they're working with Great Bay Community College to train people. And it's not just youth, though. It's interesting. The ranges were like from 18 to 58, and a lot of people learning new skills. And people are very excited about this. So it's kind of rejuvenating the town. It's bringing in some manufacturing, and you know, all of that came about with lots of conversations between the education system and this company, and trying to partner together as much as possible.
Sure.
That's great.
And continuing on, when we're talking about education, I think one of the best things we can do for our businesses is have excellence in education, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
We've got to have high school graduates who can read and write and do all the basic skills necessary. And we've heard from the business community that not all of them have that, and that's why you see some of them going to Great Bay to get that remedial education that they need. We shouldn't be doing that. These kids should be graduating with all the basic fundamentals that we need. So what we need to do is improve our education system. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is back to competition, and really trying to improve it. And that means competition among public schools, too, that they can compete with one another. And students aren't stuck to where their zip code is or where they go to school.
Right.
That they can go to a public school somewhere else, and the money will follow the student. So that way you have public schools competing for those students. And guess what? We get better students and we get better results.
So I'm going to take it you're in favor of charter schools then.
Yes, I am. I'm in favor of which was a good thing in the budget.
Right. We did talk about that this year.
Yes.
So did you want to touch about that at all, or?
No, I'm a big proponent of charter schools.
Yeah.
That and also the education scholarships, which is a really big thing, where we're letting middle and lower income people or families have money that they might need to go and to have a choice in education. And the opponents of education choice and the scholarship program say, well, the average scholarship size is $2,500. And they're saying, oh, that's not going to help anyone. Well, I tell you what, the average family that's applying for these has an income of around $45,000,
Right.
you know, for a family of 4. $2,500, which is the average amount, that can be the difference to going to a different school. Maybe they can afford $6,000, but they can't afford $9,000. So maybe that extra $3,000 is going to get them over the edge.
Yeah.
And you know what? And what about that mom or that dad who's in the inner city and their kid's in a really bad school? And they can't get them out of there. And they know their kid's bright, and they want to give the kid the best education, and they want to transfer him to another school. They should have that choice. And if it means an extra $2,000 or $3,000 through that scholarship to make the difference and get that kid out of that poverty cycle, that's what we need to do.
It's interesting, this education tax credit thing in New Hampshire became a very partisan issue, which was a little startling because doing the research, other states it wasn't a partisan issue at all. In fact, in many cases it came from the other side, so it was rather shocking that they made it something that, you know, you either stay with us or not, and they kind of forced their team to...
It is, because, you know, it's helping, and what, like it or not, most of the districts that it would help the most are Democratic districts. You're talking inner city districts where it's people with less income. These education scholarships are going to help those kids the most.
Right. In fact, I thought there was a Democrat from Nashua that really spoke eloquently about, in favor of these charter schools.
That was, I think, Chris Roberts out of Keene who spoke for it.
Oh, out of Keene, yes.
Representative Chris Roberts, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of the business community, the businesses care about education because that's, you know, the results of education are the people they can hire.
Right.
And they like to see their tax dollars go to work for them.
Right.
And so they love the concept of they're going to be able to get a tax credit, they're going to be able to direct this money, this taxpayer money that was going to go maybe to somewhere else. No, it's going to go to improving education, and they like that idea.
Right, and that's what it's, I mean, the workforce, highly educated workforce is a big plus for us.
Did you, have you guys heard about this? There's a program out there, you probably know about it, but the governor's program on the, for hiring people who, and then they go through a training process and the companies can put in for that money, and like part of their wages are paid from the, by the state. I don't know if you're aware. I know my son went through it. It's the only reason why I know.
There was a bill that we were talked about, but it only affected 12 people, I think. I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a different one. We just passed a bill that would allow people to stop looking for work so they could start their own company and still collect unemployment. And I was not a fan of that bill. As a small business owner and as someone who pays exorbitant unemployment taxes, I don't think that's the right way to spend our money. But there are other programs that I think you're referring to.
Yeah, my son went to one of them, and what they did is they took him on, and then he got to, he actually got to go, and the employer got to have this person at no charge in the beginning. The state actually paid the wages instead of unemployment. He went to work instead. And then at the end, towards the end, what would happen is the state tapers off on the payments. Then if the employer likes the person, they hire him. And this is what happened with my son. They liked him, so they hired him.
Fantastic. So. Congratulations. That's great.
So it worked.
Yep.
Whatever they're doing, it worked.
Well, and you know, I'm sure he learned some transferable skills. So even if that particular company didn't end up hiring him, then probably someone would, because now he's got something on his resume. So it's fantastic.
Exactly. And then there's other programs that for training out there that we just throw money at companies. Like, for instance, I found this out one day at my own employer. They were talking about it, and there's a few huge big companies in New Hampshire that are just money. They're subsidizing their actual budgets with money that the state of New Hampshire's given them.
See, and that's not the right thing to do. We want to help people. We all, I think everyone in this room and probably everyone in the legislature wants to help people go back to work. But when we start talking about these programs, and we want to help them, and I'm willing to spend money if it's going to work, we don't measure them and see what the success rates are. We need to find out what's happening here. I mean, you think of your SMART objectives. In business, you know that measurable is the key one. And if we can't measure what we're throwing our money at, why are we throwing our money at it?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not always about money either. There's programs like Tif Districts that people, towns can kind of create to spur on business and encourage them to grow. Are you familiar with Tif Districts at all? And what's your thoughts on those?
I haven't had to deal with that in my town, thank goodness. But you know, every town has to do every town has to do what's best for them and make their own decisions. And I think the best decisions are made closest to the people. So I'll leave that to your town to make those decisions.
Yeah, we could make it.
I think it's worked out. The TIF districts that we've done in Derry, I think, have worked out fine.
There are a lot of businesses starting up in our TIF district. It's doing great right now. So yes, I think it did work out.
No, there's another program called enterprise zoning, which is similar to the TIF district. You know, you're giving, you're allocating some of the taxes instead of them going to schools. You're using some of that money to pay off that bond. And that could be something that could spur on business as well, especially, Jim, you had mentioned the downtown, you know, with empty storefronts.
Downtown needs, we need to do something because if the storefronts are empty, but you know, I don't know whether it's a trend in people. People just, we have to drive. In Derry, it's not a walking town, so you have to drive anyway.
Yours is a commuting town pretty much overall too, and so they have to drive by the mall to get here if they're living down, if they're working down in Massachusetts.
I think every town has to do their own analysis to figure out, well, what do we want to be? Is it a downtown community, or is that going to work anymore or not? Right. I look at Bedford, and we really don't have a downtown.
When you even look at Concord, they tried the whole revitalizing thing, and then they did well. It was like listed as one of these great downtowns. But the bottom line, unless people come there and shop, and that's, again, going back to consumer choice, there's not a whole lot you can do. You have to make it a destination. You have to make that downtown a destination.
Right, and something else there.
Right, everybody has to pull in. I mean, the property owners have got a big say in this as well. I mean, that's part of the Derry's problem as well. Some of the building owners could be a little bit more flexible. But the free market's got to really play a big part of that.
And you look at thriving downtowns like Portsmouth, because it is a destination. People go there to walk and shop.
Well, they have the water. They have the you know, it's big, and then they have all the little
North
stores
Conway
and bars.
has no water, but they do it. They have that same thing.
Yeah, but they have the mall there. The outlet stores.
But see, they've defined themselves, and so they have all of that, and so each community has to define itself as to what it wants to be.
Absolutely. You got to find the niche.
Something to offer.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And I think if you, like we talked about, creating these hubs of energy, you know, if you make a decision, wow, we really want high tech, or we really want education, or whatever it is that you want, once you start building it and you start attracting a few of those companies, more will come.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Now, what do you think of, I know a friend of mine is from Ireland, and they have to be tested to graduate high school. So we mentioned earlier that some of these people that are graduating high school aren't that good at English or they're not that good at math or whatever they're deficient on, that they need this other training.
They shouldn't have gotten to graduation if they're not proficient. They really, and that has been a problem, as you know. And I have 3 kids in the school, and they're all in the public school system. I have a middle school, a high schooler, and I also have an elementary school. So I'm seeing the whole spectrum of how they're teaching. And one of my first beefs was, they're not teaching my kid how to read cursive. So I took it upon myself, but that's another issue. But the thing is you don't want to have a kid graduate or move on to the next class unless they're proficient.
Right.
And you're doing a huge disservice to that child and that child's family if you do promote the kid without the necessary skills. And the other argument is, well, then they're not with their peers, because now they've been held back. But what's worse in the long run, that you graduate a kid who has no skills, or you graduate a kid who has a basic set of knowledge? And I don't have the answer. I'm not a school teacher or administrator. I just have 3 kids, and it makes me an expert on being a mom and what's best for my kids.
And the key is the parents are plugged in.
Well, that's very important.
It has to be a team effort. You know, it's not just the schools doing their own thing.
There has to be high standards, and everyone wants outcomes and results. But at the same time, we can't keep teaching kids to the test, which is what I hear over and over. We're burning out our educators because that's not the fun part of teaching. That's not fun for the students. That's not how they learn best.
Right.
But it seems like that's been our focus, and I'd like to see us get away from that and focus on making sure they've learned their proficiencies and so can contribute to society. And not just in the STEM. I know right now we're focused on science and technology and all of that.
Which are
and those
very
are
important,
important,
yes.
absolutely. But we cannot lose sight of English and communication skills and
Right.
interpersonal skills, which also truly matter in life.
And not only that, humanities. I know everyone says, why do we need humanities? Well, you know what? Because I want my kid to be well-rounded. I want my kid to know a little bit about music and a little bit about art, not just to be that brain who knows everything about the moon and how we can, colonize it.
Right.
That'd be wonderful too. But you do want a well-rounded kid. So the kid, when he gets further in life, I say kid because I got 3 of them, but you do want a well-rounded kid. So when they go to college, they're going to take some of those classes and they're going to have some basic knowledge, and it's not going to be foreign to them. And one of my key things, and we were just talking about this before, is foreign languages. I mean, we say we're competing with other states, which we are, but we are competing against the world.
Right.
Because those kids over in China and Japan and Ireland and everywhere else are right now probably studying. Well, my kids are at the Stratham Fair right now.
Right.
They're competing against my kids. And so my kids have to have a knowledge that is as strong as them. And one of those is foreign language. And we talk about everyone's doing Chinese now. I think in our country, probably the most important languages based upon our demographics is Spanish.
Right.
It's our second language, whether we want to admit to it or not.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I can agree, and I think we can't lose track of the whole ball of wax as far as the educational process and the arts and all that, and we can't lose track of that. We need to be well-rounded because it makes a better person in the long run.
Right.
When
We're
the-
building citizens. We're not
Citizens.
just building employees. Yes.
But it's hard for us as a legislator because we always say we want local control, local control.
Right.
So the last thing we want is the states saying all of these mandates out on the local towns, because it's a mandate and then it becomes how are we going to fund this, a 28A issue if we say everyone has to have Spanish. It should be based upon what the local community wants and needs.
Right.
I do like the idea of having some basic standards, but I think everyone does, or you wouldn't send your kid to those schools. But it is up to the local communities. And that's why some people choose school districts over other school districts. That's why I chose to move to Greenland and raise my kids there.
Right.
And other people choose other communities. And that goes back to the people who are in communities where they need that choice and
Right.
can't necessarily move.
I mean, Derry's very well known for Pinkerton Academy. So I sell real
exactly.
estate for a living, so we get people that say, I have to get into Pinkerton. My kids have to get into
Yes.
Pinkerton because it's a great school. So
is great.
they'll seek it out that way. But
And Bedford has a great high school.
yes, absolutely.
And
Okay.
Portsmouth does too. We have
Yeah.
great feeder towns, so
Yeah.
it's a really good school. It's one of the top in the state.
Absolutely. So now,
Little plug
next,
there.
now next year, what do you think for getting back to the business side of things? What are we going to see at the State House? Do you think pertaining to business that'll help
Well,
businesses?
the second year normally is a little bit quieter than the first year because now we're starting to gear up in terms of what are we going to do for elections. So what types of bills, and a lot of what happens is it becomes, I found, a little more politically based of what bills are going to make us look better or not, that type of thing. In terms of putting more business things, there's not a lot you can do that affects the budget, which I think is the biggest thing. If we keep our taxes low,
Right.
that's one thing. Regulation, Laurie touched on that. That is a great place. We can continue to look at the regulation that is unnecessary and overburdening. There's good regulation out there because we do need some. I mean, I don't want carte blanche out there and everyone can do what they want. We've seen that happen. and
Right.
Some pretty negative results. But we can continue to look at regulation that we don't need to make it easier for these businesses to open here and to do business here. I think that's one of the key components we can do. If we, in 2 years or in a year and a half, we come back and we can do the budget again, keep the budget steady, and still have it at 10.7 billion, we know the revenues are going to go up. Maybe at that point we can start looking at the BPT and BET tax and
Right.
cutting them.
Yeah, obviously we'd love to be able to reduce some taxes, but it is difficult to do that in a second year. But we're already in a budget. And plus because we have a divided house, if you will. It's going to be hard to pass those kind of partisan issues. So it will be mostly on reducing some of the regulation and solving real problems. You know, when we reach out to businesses, we hear some of the problems that are out there, and some of them are not, you know, front page headline news. You're not going to see them in the paper. I'll give you an example of one that came up on the Seacoast, actually, and this was the definition of beer. And our definition of beer was preventing a company from distributing in our state, so he ended up having to manufacture it in one state, distribute it from another state. Well, we fixed one line of one RSA and created 8 jobs in a day. So those are the types of things I'm okay with. They don't have to be that sexy, but they do have to fix problems, and so we've gotten a lot of great ideas on that. Those are the types of things that we'll be putting forward.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Well, beer is big in New Hampshire too, though.
It's a big industry, yes it is.
That microbrewery thing is huge.
Yes.
You know, on the books, there's no such thing, I think, as nanobrewery. There's only microbrewery and brewery. There's no such thing as nanobrewery.
Right.
But yeah, it is, especially, you know, they now have these pub tours or what.
Yeah, it's almost becoming a tourism industry.
It is.
So
It's redefining themselves once again.
My wife and I went to Portsmouth last summer, and we spent the night over there, and we went to all the little.
Get your little growler and go.
We went to all the little pubs over there and tried the different brews.
Yeah, they have growler. They have a little bus now. They do growler
that's
tours.
awesome.
We didn't do
It's
the
a
bus,
really
we
cool
walked.
industry. Another little industry that we've
And
pumped
so, you know,
up.
it's all about enabling things. Sometimes our
Yes.
regulations just hold things back, and we've spent the last 2 years spending some time, and again, small little bills here and there that just make it easier, let's say, for the North Country to expand their ATV trails.
Right.
And that just creates jobs out there, creates some economic opportunities, and
A lot of sign making too.
a lot of sign making. So those are the types of things that we can enable to happen, and then let the free market work.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I believe the free market will take care of itself eventually, and the competition. And if you have a good product, people will buy it.
Sure. We just
Right.
got to get out of the way. And I think the state government is in the way with all of the regulation. And it's something Laurie brought up with regulation, because it is something we can do something about. A couple years ago, we had business roundtables. And as much as they hate taxes, the biggest issue was regulation.
Right.
So the streamlining process in terms of building new businesses, getting rid of unnecessary regulation, those are things we can do here and now.
Excellent.
Well, taxes, I know we did some help last session on business taxes. I think we raised the threshold.
We did,
for
yes.
small businesses.
For small businesses that pay the business enterprise tax based on their payroll, actually, we raised the threshold from $150,000 in sales to $200,000 in sales. And that's a big thing, because if you're thinking about, wow, should I start that new hair salon? That would give you that push to say, yeah, I've got a break, I'm going to try it.
Yeah, so that,
That creates jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm okay with it being 3 to 5 jobs every single day. But if we did
Yeah.
that,
They add
if
up.
every
They do.
LLC owner in the state of New Hampshire hired one person, we would eliminate unemployment in the state.
Yeah, and speaking of unemployment, where are we at? Do you know in New Hampshire?
5.3.
So that's a good, I mean, it's a low number.
It's a very low number.
It's a low
Comparing up the
number.
national
It could be
number.
better. I mean, I just
Yeah.
looked it up before we came here today, and the biggest gains were in the hospitality industry, which is great,
Yeah.
but also in state government, which is a little shocking. So
Good.
we'd like to see more in the private sector if we could,
Right.
because as opposed to having taxpayers subsidize it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just saw Chris give us the 5-minute signal.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we've
it went
got-
by
We're down to the
quick. I had a lot
wire.
more questions, but
yeah. We were going to ask you about gambling, but well, I guess.
We can talk. We got
If
5
you
minutes
got
to talk about
2
gambling.
How about 2 minutes each?
I'll tell you where I'm at with gambling. There's a couple proposals. We're going to have the HRA, House Republican Alliance Summit, in a couple weeks, in which I hope you will all attend. I know, Laurie, you are going to attend for certain. And one of the thoughts is, I'm anti-gambling. I'll let you know that right off the bat. But an interesting proposal came up about maybe a different way of just doing slot machines and not tables, because tables is for the charitable gaming. What if we just did slot machines? And that's a thought. And so there's a proposal that we're kind of kicking around there. I don't know if I'll warm up to it, but that's something to think about. We also have right now retained is Keno. And that, I tell you what, that's, to me, is a no-brainer. I think it's entertainment. I know it's considered gambling, but I think it's entertainment, and it's going to bring a lot of money here. I think everyone knows somebody who goes down to Massachusetts to spend a couple bucks just sitting there getting entertained.
We went,
I've done it
to a
myself.
restaurant once, and we just happened to be at a restaurant, and there's people all watching the screen, and you just see numbers. I had no clue what it was. 'Cause
That is a no-brainer to bring Keno here. And again, I'm anti-gambling, but your turn, Laura.
2 minutes, okay. Well, the House Business Caucus did not take a position on casino gambling because we could see both sides of the argument from the business perspective. You know, it is good for some businesses, but maybe not so good for other businesses, and so that's why we took a no position stance. I'm a policy wonk. The policy has to be proper. It has to be well thought out. And this particular bill that we were vetting this year was a poorly written bill, in my opinion, especially from the state revenue perspective. We have to look at things for the long term, and I think there was not going to be enough money short term, and there certainly wouldn't be any reliable revenue stream in the long term, and that's what concerned me.
Right. So it wasn't the 80 million up front, it was the 130
well,
million.
The 80 million up front would take
annually.
Quite a bit of time to get, and I think they were hoping that it was going to magically appear in this budget, and that was not realistic. It would take a while to do that, and other states have done a different and maybe a better job of maximizing the revenue they could get, making sure it was going to be level over time, and I'm not sure that this bill did this properly.
No. And my biggest issue was the state chosen monopoly. That's just unconstitutional.
Yeah,
we heard.
All right, so we can go on and on.
All right, so I'm going to close with it saying that thank you, ladies, for being on the show.
It's our pleasure.
Very much.
This is the Legislators Lounge. You can find us on the internet at derrylounge.com. You can find us on Facebook at Legislators Lounge, or you can search YouTube and see all our previous episodes at the Legislators Lounge. So once again, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.